just that. We're definitely gonna have to do another episode of this because I'm kind of curious what that is. Again, there's about 23 episodes of this, and it did originally come out on GameTap. As far as I know, GameTap's not around anymore, so you can actually get these all on Steam. So we're gonna get ready for our guest, yay! And then when we get back, when we finish, we're gonna be doing episode 10, which is the singing bones, and find out what the heck keeps popping up in my screen. So, guys, get that happiness out there. Come on, let's get a little bit of excitement. Just a little bit. Just come on, get a little bit of that excitement. Let me grab this and change it. So get your questions ready, because again, as I always state, you guys are the ones that ask the questions, minus a few, and I ask them. That is, if I find them okay. Oh, there we go. There's the hype. There's the hype I expect out of you guys. So it is time. We are 1 minute before he's going to join us. Let's see if he'll come in a little early. Hype train is real. So thank you to everyone that joined us. Sorry again that we could not dual stream on YouTube, but until that copyright strike goes away, which hopefully it will very soon, we're stuck doing it this way. Skype, please don't die on me. Welcome,
Hello.
welcome, welcome, American McGee. I hope you're ready to get tortured by some sinners.
Hey there. Yeah, absolutely ready to get tortured.
So we just showed off your game Grim, and I have a question. Just how did you come up with that game?
So before I answer the questions, there seems to be a big audio kind of delay and then feedback. Do you hear that?
No. Do you have the stream on? Because it might be that doing it.
Uh, that might be what it is. All right. So your question was, how did we come up with Grimm? Is that right?
Yes.
Um, so that was kind of a weird setup because I was in China. I'd actually moved to Hong Kong and hadn't really been thinking about making any new games at that time. And then GameTap came along and said, we want some original content. Would you be willing to make a game? And I expected they might have some sort of brief, some sort of outline for what they had in mind. But in fact, they said you've got carte blanche. You can do whatever you want to do. Their main request was that it be something to do with fairy tales because obviously they wanted to sort of follow up on the excitement and the interest that was in the Alice series. So I sat down with my creative partner RJ and with kind of collection of fairy tales, and we started trying to think of, are we going to do a single fairy tale? Are we going to do a Red Riding Hood game? Or are we going to do something that is, more than one fairy tale? And we finally came up with, the episodic idea around lots of different fairy tales and decided to make it, something presented sort of like a TV show by the Grimm main character. And so that was how the whole idea came about.
Now, would you go back to doing games on PC and consoles and stuff? Because I believe your last one was Alice Madness Returns, wasn't it?
That was about 5 years ago when we launched the last console game, Madness Returns. And since then, we've been focused purely on mobile free-to-play games. And so I think we've launched, I think it's 7 new mobile free-to-play games in the last 5 years. I think for me personally, I've had enough of doing mobile development for these kinds of games. And I think I would be interested in going back to do console or PC games. But at the same time, I've just passed the sort of 23rd year of making games nonstop. I haven't really had a break in there. So I've been thinking that before I go to do another big PC or console title, I'm probably going to take a year or two, sort of sabbatical, and just take a break.
Well, I think all your fans are going to be super excited to hear you coming back to console, that's for sure. Now, you did just finish an Alice Otherlands, wasn't it a movie?
So Otherland started off as a Kickstarter project. They're trying to put us in possession of the Alice film rights for making what you would call the linear rights, meaning that it's anything having to do with film, television, comic books, books, and those rights are not, in fact, owned by EA. They're owned by a company, independent company outside of EA. So my goal was to try to acquire those rights 100% for myself. And in order to do that, we raised some money on Kickstarter. We had what's called an option on those rights, which means we bought them for a period of time. And then as a way of rewarding the backers who helped us to get that option and to work towards buying the rights, we created a series of, there was an art book, there was art posters, and then there were two short animations. One of them was stop motion and one of them was CGI. Each of them featuring Alice going into the mind of another character, another historical character, and yeah, we just launched those a few months ago.
I unfortunately heard about the Kickstarter too late, otherwise I would have given you all my money.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with Kickstarters is you almost need to do a Kickstarter to promote the Kickstarter, right? We had people who were complaining that they didn't see it and were asking us to do it again, or complaining, why didn't you market this better? And this is just the reality of trying to pitch things on the internet. There's so much content out there. There's only so much time and money we can devote to trying to promote these things. And so a lot of people missed out. Quite a few people were really upset that they missed out, but we did the best we could, and hopefully we'll be able to do something more with the Alice property in the future.
Well, I certainly hope so. It's one of my favorite series. Now for the stuff that were available on Kickstarter, the posters, the DVD and stuff, is there a place where people can still go and pick them up if they want to buy them and, throw their money at you?
Unfortunately, there's not. I think obviously we would love to be able to get those pieces of the property into people's hands. As I said, I think we're aware that there's quite a lot of frustration out there. People who missed the Kickstarter and want to get their hands on the art book or the DVDs or the posters. The problem is that the deal that we struck for those rights only allowed us to produce rewards that were going to be given directly to the backers of the campaign, and it doesn't allow for us to sell things outside of the Kickstarter campaign. So if I were to go and start offering those things for sale, it would be no different than if some random person on the internet slapped the Cheshire Cat from the games onto a T-shirt and started selling it online. It's IP theft. So I don't have license to do that, and yeah, unfortunately, I just can't.
Now, for those that are a little confused, because not everybody in the chat knows, what exactly happened between you and EA and Alice, if you don't mind talking about it?
Well, nothing, sort of happened. That makes it sound like it was something bad happened. But a simple thing was that I was an employee of EA when I came up with the Alice idea. And when you work for a corporation, big or small, especially if you're in a creative industry like games, you sign a contract when you go to work that says that any invention, any creation that you come up with while you are an employee of that company is the automatic property of the company. So that was exactly the type of situation that applied to me. And when I worked at EA and they asked me to come up with an idea and I came up with Alice, they automatically owned it. And so to this day, they still, as I said, they own the game rights. But then a few years back, they sold the linear rights to an outside company. So the only thing that's really unusual about what happened with me and EA and then these rights is the fact that someone at EA did sell half of the rights. They sold the linear rights, which is a very unusual thing to have happen, which of course led to the unusual thing of me doing a Kickstarter and trying to buy those rights on my own. But to this day, my relationship with EA is good. I think that they understand that there are a lot of Alice fans in the world, and I think that I maintain hope that some point in the future they will come back and want to do another Alice game.
Here's hoping. Now, there was also talks of an Oz game a couple of years ago.
Sure. Well, we did a Kickstarter around the Oz concept, and it really just kind of died immediately out the gate. We had, I think, a fair amount of press on it and some interest on it, but there just seemed to be too many questions, too many things that weren't presented properly in the Kickstarter overview. Um, it just didn't take off. And the big one of the biggest problems is just the sheer amount of money that's necessary to make one of these games. I think we'd set a pretty low initial goal. I think it was like $1 million, but I think the reality is that like you guys were just playing Grimm. That game cost $3 million to make. The Alice Madness Returns, the last console game that we did, that was more. I think that was closer to like 10 or $11 million. So when you go to Kickstarter and you're telling people we want to make a big ambitious game, and you set your target kind of low, but you hope that it's going to be much higher. I don't even think we raised $100,000 in the first week. So after the first week, I just shut it down.
Maybe you should look at opening a Patreon.
I'm not sure how that would work. How would that?
That's the Patreon's the one where people can pay per month to help with a project.
Yeah, I understand how Patreon works. I'm just not sure I get how.
Oh, I was
So
joking around. As in, people pay you per month to start working on the game.
I see. I see. I like Patreon as a model, and I thought about using it quite a bit, but I have thought about using it in connection to just to one game. I've recently been floating, I guess there's a pun in there, an idea about developing games on sailboats, and I thought that Patreon would be a good way for people to support that endeavor. And so, in the future, I may try something like that, but I don't know if it'll be about one project.
That might be neat. A few people are asking. Let's see. Captain Squawky asked, "Did Alice just not sell well? Why isn't there a third game?"
I think Alice, as far as EA is concerned, it did the minimum that they'd like to see a game do, which is that it recouped its investment, right? So, like, I think the first Alice game cost EA like $3 million, and they think they spent another $3 or $4 million on marketing. So you can imagine that overall, it might have cost EA something like $10 million to make and market. It really made back over $10 million. They're looking at it in terms of success. They want to see multiples. Have a certain set. Does the thing make a 3 times multiple, 5 times multiple? You look at things is they want to see a minimum of a 3 times multiple. So if it costs $10 million, they want to see it make $30 million. But I think for them to think that a product can become a franchise and can have a constant stream of sequels, it ought to be doing something like a 4 or 5 times multiple. So, I don't think the Alice games were obviously not considered failures by EA, or they wouldn't have made a sequel. At the same time, considered hits. And so I think this is one of the reasons why EA sort of struggles in moving quickly to make more of that content.
Sorry, one moment. Trying to fix my internet. It's acting up a bit.
No problem.
There we go. Hopefully that fixed it. Somebody goes, Grimm only cost $3 million to make?
Well, it looks like the way he's asking that, though, is he's astounded that it costs that much money. But you got to think about, it's pretty easy math to do. $3 million divided into 2 years, so $1.5 million per year. You divide that into 12 months. You're talking about say $100,000 per month. And now you talk about the size of the team. It was about 35 people that made Grimm. And so you start to get down to why it is that games cost so much. if you divide the $100,000 per person into 35 people, then you're talking about an average of about 3,000 US per person per month. Of course, that's not taking, you have to understand that that's a blended cost. That's got to cover their computer, their software, it's got to cover the game engine, it's got to cover electricity, it's got to cover insurance, it's got to cover travel and all these other expenses, right, that go into making a game. So $3 million sounds like a lot, but when you spread it out over 2 years and you have 35 people working on a project and all the things that go into developing a game, it's actually not a lot of money. And by way of comparison, Kabam, I heard just recently did a mobile game. So it's a single player mobile game with 3D assets in it. They spent, I think, 2 years working on it. And from what I understand, it cost them something like, I don't know, I think it was 12 or $13 million to make a mobile game. So it's not hard to spend a lot of money making these games.
Wow. So what exactly got you into doing mobile games?
It's kind of a I don't know. I look back on it now and I sort of wish that I hadn't done it because when we finished up Alice Madness Returns, I was ready to take a break. The problem was we had this big team. At that point, we'd grown the team internally to about 85 people, and a lot of those people were leaving, but we still had a core team, and it was a group of people I really enjoyed working with. And at the same time, we didn't have any sort of projects lined up. We didn't have um, any debts. We didn't have any obligations. We basically could have shut the company down and walked away. And I thought, well, if we do that, we're gonna lose this thing that we've built. And so I started looking around to try to figure out, what would be the next thing we could work on. And I stumbled upon these investors who said, well, look, if you put the money that you've currently got, in the bank, together with the money we're willing to invest in you, then we'll invest. But we want you guys to work on mobile games because that's the next big thing, right? And so we did. We took the money, we restructured the team, and we committed to making mobile games. And so that's basically where it came from. It was from the investors who said, "We'll give you some money if you start focusing on making mobile games."
Well, I actually like your mobile games, but I think I like your console games a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually pretty proud. While I'm not a big fan of mobile games in general, and while I don't even really play our mobile games that much, but I'm really proud of what the team has done. They've actually put out a lot of very high quality 3D multiplayer mobile games over the years. And yeah, I think early on they were doing stuff that was considered quite cutting edge. Unfortunately, these days, 5 years later, the idea of a 3D multiplayer mobile game is, sort of like that's the baseline that you have to have that before you can even be in the business. And then, of course, at the same time, there's become so much competition, and the cost for marketing the games has gotten to be so great that it's been very difficult for us as a small independent studio to stay in the game.
Well, what made you want to open a studio in China?
Well, I didn't move to China to open a studio. I moved initially to Hong Kong to work for a company that was already there, and that was when I was working on Bad Day LA. The desire to move to Asia actually went back many years prior to that. Like the first time I visited Japan, I fell in love with Japan. Someone offered me a job there. I passed on that offer, and then I spent years kicking myself for not making the leap and not going to Japan. So this opportunity to move to Hong Kong came up, and I took it. And it was sort of like I just jumped, immediately without thinking, because I just wanted to get out of the States and I wanted to see what life in Asia was like. And then, like I said, the offer from GameTap to do Grim, it really came out of the blue. I'd been traveling to Shanghai quite a bit to help some friends with companies they were starting up here, but I hadn't really thought about starting my own company until I got this call. And they said, look, we've got this money. We need you to make a game. And so because my feet were already sort of in Shanghai at that point, helping some friends start their businesses, I thought, well, if they'll give me the money to start the business here, I'll start the business here. And I expected them to say no. I mean, who would say yes to that? If you call somebody up and say, we want you to make a game, and then the person says, well, I don't have a game studio, And if you give me that money, I'm going to make a new game studio in the middle of China. And remember, this was like 10 years ago. So now China's sort of on everybody's minds, and people understand China's become, you know, we're still long past. And so we are.
One moment. Skype, would you please stop losing your mind for 5 minutes? Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're just breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if it's just my internet because it's Comcast or if it's just Skype acting up.
It could also be because I'm in China.
True. We'll blame you this time, but just this once.
You know.
We do have, let's see. Chaos Shifter asked, what do you think of the live actions of Alice that have come out?
I saw the first one, the first Disney one. Is the second one out? I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know that the second one had been released, but I think that the first one was in terms of visuals. Tim Burton sort of can't go wrong. I mean, he's the and to are you there?
Yeah, I'm. Let me try recalling you and see if that fixes it.
Okay.
Again, sorry guys. I'm not sure what's going on. I've been having internet problems all week, so that's also it. China is censoring Skype. No, no, no. China has nothing to do with this. Well, it might, but I don't think in that way. If this still kind of breaks up, we do have an alternate way of doing this. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Hopefully it won't break up again. Otherwise, we might have to go with Plan B.
We have this problem all the time. This is one of the really big downsides, the big negative to living in China. And it's the one thing that I think on almost a daily basis makes me want to move.
I know last time we interviewed you, you talked about someday you would leave China. Are you still planning on doing that? We mentioned him leaving China, and it just completely breaks him up. One moment. I'm going to try this one other way. Give me one moment. I'm so sorry. All right, guys. The stream is going to end really quickly. So please give me 1 second. We're going to be back online in about maybe a minute. American, this is Render, my technician. His name goes without.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Let's see.
I don't know if Purity's told you, but I'm a huge fan of id Software, Doom 2, Quake, and all that stuff. So.
Oh, great. Glad to hear it.
All right, it says we're live, we can resume the interview if everyone can hear us.
Okay.
Would you like to ask your question, Render? I know you're dying to ask at least one question.
I most certainly am. Let me just go grab it. Sorry for my impersonation. What was it like working with John Carmack on John Romero? Is my question to you.
Well, I mean, I guess in some ways it was just like working with anyone. I mean, I think from the outside it sounds like there must have been something magical or rainbows shooting out of everybody's asses at id. But actually, I mean, we all just worked a lot. I think there's plenty of stories about the difference in the personalities between the two Johns. John Carmack is, has a form of autism, like Asperger's. So there's very little emotion there. When you'd be talking with him, he could just suddenly turn around and go back to work without going through sort of the regular, all right, we're done talking. Yep, see you later. Okay, bye-bye. He would just like a switch. Whereas, Romero was sort of the creative path of it. He's very spontaneous, very flamboyant. But like I said, at the time, it just was the place that we went to work. I think if you look back on it in history, it was certainly an interesting place, but at the end of the day, it was just a lot of work.
Okay.
Now, how does it feel seeing video
Uh,
games change from, Doom to, well, the Doom coming out now, and how much of a change there is with graphics and gameplay and all of that, and knowing you were a part of it?
When I look at sort of the evolution of games, I think to me it's a lot of the more things change, the more things stay the same. I think game systems, graphic displays, animation quality, those kinds of things obviously improve over time. But the fact that something like Minecraft can still be one of the most successful, if not the most successful games in the world, I think is testament to the underlying attraction that games like Doom had back in the day and that they still have today. It doesn't matter how much stuff you heap on top of them, that core fun is always going to be there. And so in some ways, I think that there hasn't been a lot of evolution of that sort of core fun. I think we're going to start to see more evolution in actually truly new directions with the advent of VR and AR. But yeah, I think the last 20 years, I mean, there's obviously been great leaps forward in technology in terms of how we interface with it and what it does for us as an entertainment experience that hasn't changed that much.
Has your company done any kind of playing around with VR stuff, like maybe designing a game as practice for a VR uh, group or anything like that?
So I really want to get into VR, and I have an Oculus here at home, but for the company, we haven't touched it because we've had a sort of a mandate from our investors that we work on mobile games, and so these two things don't really line up. When you have investors and then they've given you an expectation for the type of products that you build, it can be difficult to switch to new types of products because that's not what they brought you on board for. But again, for me personally, I'm very interested in it, and certainly going to be spending, sort of try to spend some of my personal time on it.
I think it'd be neat to see what you could come up with VR. I'm sure it won't be terrifying at all.
I mean, there's so much you can do with it. I've got it here at home. Like I said, when we have dinner parties, then we'll grab some of the latest demos, and some of my favorite stuff isn't the terrifying stuff at all. It's just the sort of immersive, experiential stuff. In fact, I really like the sort of virtual tourism apps that are out there, where you're just sort of in, Rome, or you're just in Tokyo. You're just in some environment. I find that to be quite compelling, quite relaxing.
You could try putting your boat game idea on that. That might actually be interesting.
Well, the boat idea isn't necessarily for a game. The boat idea is a kind of hackathon or a game jam that lasts 10 days, in which we put three developers per boat with as many as 3 or 4 boats, and each boat is containing one development team. And then over the course of 10 days, those teams are tasked with trying to create as many games or apps as they can, or maybe they just focus on making one game or app. And then at the same time, they're mixing that in with sailing, diving, fishing, exploring on shore. So I have a sailboat in Thailand, and that's where I've been imagining we'd set this kind of thing. So that's more like a pirate game development idea, out of which might come all kinds of games, but mostly going to be obviously very small games. These aren't going to be massive games, but I think some interesting ideas could still come out of it.
That sounds really cool, actually. I think a lot of groups might be interested in helping with that.
Yeah, so the feedback so far from developers has been quite positive. But then again, I mean, when you say to somebody, "Hey, we'll fly you out to Thailand for free for 2 weeks of sailing and diving and fun," I don't think there's a lot of people that want to say no to that.
I think I need to get into game development.
There you go.
um, Now, Jay Delic asked, do you feel that VR is the future of gaming as everyone promotes it to be?
I think it's too early for me or anyone else to say, but kind of think, we've been looking at these same flat displays, at least since I was a kid, which was a very long time ago. and we've been typing on these same keyboards, and we've been, recently now we've got touch screens, but there hasn't really been a lot to move our interface with not just games, but apps in general, move those forward in a significant way. And if you do have a chance to put on, say, like an Oculus, you will get the sense that there's something greater coming down the pipe in the future, and that it could really dramatically change the way that people interface with apps and with games. It's even to the point now, I don't know if anybody's listening has seen it, but you can get these little cardboard boxes, or you can get little eyeglasses that you kind of fit onto your cell phone, which will instantly turn your cell phone into a VR device. So yeah, I think these things are going to become ubiquitous. I think there's a reason why Facebook, for instance, is spending so much money on this these days, because there is a truly revolutionary and very different experience that can be had with VR.
Now, Lucken asked, what was the first game you've ever played?
God, it's hard to say. I mean, it must have been going back to something. There was a Magnavox console when I was a kid. I can't remember what games we played on there. And then there was also just arcade machines. But again, I mean, it could go all the way back to something as simple as Asteroids or Space Invaders.
Everyone loves Space Invaders.
Yeah.
Now, let me see if I can grab some more questions. All right, Lucken, I'll ask it. Mr. McGee, are you familiar with memes?
Sure. I look at so I used to read the news every morning, and then I realized that I was reading the news and I wasn't really getting anything out of it that had any positive or meaningful impact on my day. And so I stopped reading the news, and I was reading. I look at Imager every day, so I'll instead of spending a half hour in the morning eating breakfast and reading the news, I'll actually spend a half hour browsing through all the content on Imager. So I am definitely a meme aware and very much an Imager lurker.
Somebody asked, tell us about your experiences working with Mercury Steam.
So those were the guys based in Madrid who I worked with on a game a couple of years back. It was actually their idea, the game, but I was brought on board mainly for sort of marketing and also to give them end of project feedback on how to balance the game for a Western audience. Because being an entirely Spanish team, they were concerned about whether or not their ideas and their presentation was going to resonate with a mainly English-speaking audience. So that was really fun. I got to travel to Spain a couple times, work with a guy named Enrique Alvarez and his team, and then also go on a kind of worldwide press tour to help launch the game, which was Scrapland.
Now, if you have any games that you could ever redo, if you had a chance to remake them, and however big the price was, just redo it to your dream, what game would that be?
You mean of a game that
That you've
I've made, or
designed?
something that I see? I can't say that I would really want to do that. I would get really bored, and so I don't think that I would. I'd want to redo a game. I mean, the idea of doing something that's an extension to a game that I've worked on in the past, or a sequel to it, that would be fine as long as it's sort of new content. But to go back into, say, Alice and do a remastered version of Alice, which was exactly the same shot for shot, scene for scene, except we updated all the graphics and made everything more high res and yada yada. I wouldn't be interested in doing that. I would find that to be incredibly boring.
Well, of course you could put new content in. I mean, just from scrap, put things that you couldn't put into the game before, all that kind of stuff.
So you mean to remake it and hopefully to remake it to be better?
Yes, just put
Is
in
that right?
everything you couldn't
Yeah.
before because of time and all that fun stuff.
I still don't know how interested I would be in that. And here's one of the reasons why, because I think the way that the world judges product at times has sometimes it has very little to do with the actual product and much more to do with people's perception of what it was you were trying to do or who you are and what they expect that you should have done. And so someone in the comments here has mentioned Bad Day LA, and I think that's a really good example of expectations far outstripping the final result. Even though, I set out making that game knowing that at the end of the day it was not going to be a AAA game. It did not have a big budget. It did not have a highly experienced team. And yet the press and the audience and everybody, when they saw it, they saw my name on it, they said, well, this is going to have to be as good or better than the last thing that he did. And when it wasn't, it created a dissonance, and people were, offended, and they were confused, and, they wanted to slam it. But I think if that game had come out and my name had not been attached to it and the expectation had not been set, that it would have done a lot better. And my proof for that is if you go and watch the Let's Play videos on YouTube, where a lot of these guys who are playing the game don't know who I am, they don't know anything about Alice. All they know is that they stumbled upon this wacky, weird game, and then they're playing it, and they're laughing their asses off, and they're having a great time. So there's something, that you have to be really careful about when it comes to, going out and saying, well, I'm going to redo something. Now you've set up all these expectations, and frankly, I'm just not that interested in it.
Now you mentioned Let's Playing. What do you think of Let's Players? Do you think they're stealing content? Do you think that, what they do is fine? Because I know a lot of companies and a lot of people are very polarized on Let's Players. So what are your thoughts on them? Are we bad people?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think there's a lot of industries where you've got similar types of things going on. So, imagine a cover band who, play music that's not their own, but it's songs that everybody knows and loves, and then they're bringing their own little special something to it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it at all. I'm not even sure I understand why there's a debate around it. I think it took a lot of people by surprise. Again, there's a lot of people I know out there who are like, why on earth would anyone want to watch this? But being a YouTube connoisseur myself and having subscriptions to lots of different channels and knowing that there's times where I want to have something on in the background, and having somebody play a game or review a game in the background while I'm cooking dinner or something is, it's fun. It's sort of in my industry. It's aligned with my hobbies. A lot of times the content and the guy presenting it is funnier and more interesting than the game being played. And so I think there's a lot of interesting value there.
Now, do you think, because I know a lot of companies have come out and said Let's Players are costing them money in sales and things like that. I think it's just the opposite, where people see a game and they think they want to buy it. What are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
Now, this is, established industries have for years. So, think back to the music industry when there was cassette tapes. Maybe you're too young for this. I don't know how old you are, but maybe your audience. But, there was a period where there were cassette tapes and people were concerned when cassette tapes came along that because they could be easily copied, that it was going to destroy the vinyl industry. Of course, vinyl persisted for years, and I think still does to this day, for DJs and musicians. Same thing happened when CDs came out. Oh, well, now that they're CDs and the quality's never going to degrade, people are going to stop, buying, multiple tapes or multiple albums when those things wear out. And of course that didn't happen. It's this constant concern. And then, when MP3s come out, oh no, MP3s are never to copy. But if you look at the money that's been made in the industry over the years, the companies that embrace the new technologies and figure out how to rework their marketing and their sales around the changes as opposed to opposing the changes, those are the companies that have become incredibly successful. And the same thing's happening with the film industry. The same thing's happening with the games industry. There are resistant companies, and then there's adaptive companies. And the adaptive companies see what's happening, and they profit from it. And the resistive companies oftentimes go out of business because they can't figure out how to adapt.
If only everyone thought like you'd make it so much easier to be a Let's Player. Now, Chaos Shifter asked, did you get any ideas from the HP Lovecraft series when you started working on Alice?
Well, I think Lovecraft is something that a lot of creators in our business are, intimately aware of. Certainly the development team that we worked with in Texas, which was Rogue Entertainment, they had their offices right down the hall from id. And when I was at id, we had a guy there working there named Sandy Peterson, who uh, did a bunch of D&D games based on Cthulhu. One of them, I think, was the Call of Cthulhu. So we all of us understood, the whole Lovecraftian universe. We understood the monsters. A lot of that also went into Doom. If you look at a lot of the levels that were created in there, so there's certainly a lot of crossover and a lot of influence. Both in terms of design, in terms of story. Sure, I mean there's definitely awareness and an influence there.
Now, are you yourself a fan of H.P. Lovecraft?
I mean, I've read the books. I don't, sort of mark myself out as a fanatic about it or a big fan, but I mean, I certainly have enjoyed reading the books.
Let's see. You guys can still ask your questions. It's all right. He won't bite, I promise. But that's Render's job. So, if you could move anywhere from China, where would be the next place you would go?
Like I said, I have a sailboat in Thailand, and so I spend a lot of time there sailing, and that's sort of what I think I'm gearing up for now is to have part of my life be here in China, and then spend some of my time over there sailing, and then hopefully have this sailboat development idea also at work over there. So I'll kind of split my time between the two places, but I really like Thailand a lot. It's still winter here in Shanghai. Just last week it was like -1 and raining and sleeting, and I really hate winter. And of course, it's always sunny and shiny in Thailand. So I mean, I'm a big fan of tropical weather and being out on the water there.
Now, would you ever come back to America?
Um, I don't know. I don't have anything in particular against being in America or the concept of America. Um, Without getting into the politics, I think that all governments in the world are kind of shit, and it's. But the reason I'm out here is because I enjoy adventure. I like being out in the world. I like seeing new places and meeting new people. I like exploring, and I grew up in the States. I saw quite a lot of the States, from coast to coast, while I was there, and I feel like I kind of get it. And so, if I come back, it's going to be after another 20 years of adventuring around.
Now, somebody asked, is American your real name?
It is. That's the name my mother gave me, and yeah, I don't know, there's much more to it than that.
Okay, so here's a question about the industry. I know you're aware of Anita Sarkeesian. Do you think it's hard for females to get into game design?
Well, I think it's hard for anybody to get into game design. You have to remember that a game designer is on a team, usually one person, and that means there's one role for the game designer, and then the team might be 30 or 60 or 100 or more people. So in terms of the ratio of designers to the other roles on the team, you're talking about, it being the most sort of rare spot. And I think that there's a lot of competition for that spot. So, I mean, I don't know that it's harder. In my career, I've known quite a few female game designers. And so, I mean, just based on my experience, I'd say that there is such a thing as a female game designer. I've seen female game producers. We've had female game producers in our company. So I don't know. This whole question of, is it harder for a woman to do X in a particular tech or, games or science field? I think there's a lot of other variables that go into why it is that women do or don't pursue those careers. And I don't think that it's because there's some sort of institutional barrier to them being in those positions. I think it's a bit more complicated than that.
Well, do you agree with what third wave feminists say about all games are sexist and all women in games are used as sex objects and things like that?
Well, maybe you haven't seen it, but I mean, I tend to be pretty vocal on this subject on my Facebook page and
That's kind of
Twitter.
why I asked.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I bring up this topic, brought it up a couple times. I don't want to sort of every time Anita Sarkeesian releases one of these videos or some critic of the games industry releases some sort of statement, I don't want to comment on it every time because I feel like it starts to get quite redundant. But I do think that there is an issue very much uh, sort of, it's not just in games. This is happening everywhere. It's happening in politics. It's happening in the universities. It's happening, in other types of media where there's this sort of puritanism coupled with political correctness, coupled with a lot of shaming, be it about race, be it about gender. But basically, it's a whole group of people who are trying to reshape the way that the people in the U.S. think and feel about things like freedom of expression, or an artist's right to offend, or anybody's right to offend, or their right to not be offended. And so these things are all connected together. I don't think that we're seeing sort of a single front attack on games alone. I think we're seeing an attack that spreads across all aspects of society in the U.S. And I don't think that this is by accident. I think that there's a greater agenda that's being fueled by all the way at the top by the media and just larger corporations like Facebook and Google, because I think that there's a greater goal to start limiting people's ability to have free expression.
I can agree with that. Now, do you think it's going to get worse? Because from what I've seen, I've been called, as a female gamer, I've been called several times a brainwashed misogynist pig because of my opinions on gaming.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the quickest way that the other side knows how to shut down the conversation is to accuse to attack your character and to accuse you of being a misogynist, being a sexist, being a racist, being any one of these ists, right? I do think it's going to get worse, and I've said this a lot of times at the end of the posts that I've made on this topic. I think we've already lost this battle, and I think that what we can do right now is comment on it, sort of comment on the ship sinking as it goes down. I don't mean to be fatalistic or sort of depressing about this, but I think that the larger agenda, again, is not being driven on the front lines by people like Anita Sarkeesian. I think that they are convenient pawns in a larger strategy, and that strategy is being driven at the highest levels of the government and of the corporations that we use as the platforms for communication. And I think the end game is what you see here in China, which is a sort of benevolent dictatorship where there is absolute control over what you can say and see and think and do.
So you think it's going to happen to America? See, I think it's going to be worldwide, honestly, because it looks like it's
Oh
already
no, it is
happening.
worldwide. It absolutely is worldwide. Yeah, no, this is a concerted, effort. I mean, this is the goal of governments, period. And that's why I said earlier, I'm not in the state. It's not that I left the states because I think that the U.S. government is particularly bad. I'm of the mind that all governments everywhere are bad, and I'm also aware of the fact that all governments everywhere would like to curtail and control our thoughts and our speech. And of course, the internet is right now the way in which the whole world is waking up and communicating with each other and being able to spread ideas and spread concepts that could fight against that. So what are you going to do if you're the governments and the corporations? You're going to see that freedom of expression as a very significant threat. And so I think that what we're seeing is the response to that, and it is going to spread globally.
Well, what do you think of Twitter and social media groups doing things like shadow banning where you don't know you can't get your words out there?
I mean, it's been going, I think Twitter's been doing this now for at least 2 years, and people are just now starting to really make a bit of noise about it because I think Twitter's turning it up as we're getting certain, Twitter personalities or media commentators who are really starting to highlight the dangers of the situation and the problems that exist. Now they're cranking up how they're just directly banning people. So, this is exactly how it works in China. The idea of shadow bans is not new. Shadow banning and censoring, all these tools exist. They exist here in China. I mean, it exists to the point that you could be having a Skype phone call with someone, and if they're monitoring it and they pick up on you saying the wrong words, the call will be disconnected. The same thing goes with having a chat with somebody I used to use MSN or some other kind of chat client, and we would just sort of jokingly punch some stuff in to see what the system would do, and you could crash. You would see the chat client crash because you typed in the wrong words. And we know it wasn't just a crash because one person was on an Apple and the other person was on Windows. So clearly they'd done something to create a sort of kill packet that was sent to both clients and told both clients to just crash simultaneously. There's situations where if you type something into Google, or not Google, but Baidu, your internet will disconnect and stay disconnected for 15 minutes or more. So I mean, there's all kinds of systems in place in places like China that I think are the precursors or the harbingers of what's going to happen in the U.S.
That is both amazing and extremely frightening at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the world we live in. It's not just that there's control over what we're saying. It's also the case that, our timelines, our news feeds, all these things are being manipulated to feed us certain pieces of information or to help us to avoid seeing other pieces of information. And so it's a two-way system. It's both reading what we're saying and doing, and then it's also tailoring the content that we're reading so that our thought process can be manipulated and our opinions can be changed.
Now, I'm not sure if you know about what's going on with YouTube and the people going insane with copyright strikes and all of the things going on with the fair use, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's quite crazy. It sounds to me like it's kind of happened in two phases. I think the first phase was these sort of unfair, strikes that were put in place by people who objected to having criticism of them in a video. And I think that as soon as that started to make a lot of noise, and then you had a whole other group of people who they don't care about the criticism, they don't care about copyright, they just figured out that they could build an entire company around the idea of issuing false strikes and then sucking off the revenue stream from that channel so long as the strike was in place. So that now you've got two basically types of criminals out there. The one who's abusing it because they don't want to be criticized in a video, and the one who's abusing it because by putting the strike in place, they can siphon off the revenue from that video. And clearly YouTube needs to do something about it. I saw this morning on Twitter that the CEO of YouTube, she responded and said, "We're listening." So it seems that the Where's the Fair Use campaign has actually got their attention. So hopefully they'll do something about it.
Yeah, I hope they do. I just got hit with a bunch of fake strikes.
Do you know why?
It was somebody claiming to be a Japanese company, and it looked real until I noticed that they were using a Gmail account. And YouTube so far has sided with them, even when I've shown them proof it's not actually the company.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that it's clear that there are now dozens, maybe hundreds of these companies that have set themselves up in order to monetize these false copyright claims. I don't know if you're aware of that, but when someone makes that claim, that revenue stream from that video in question goes to them. So all you got to do to make money on YouTube right now is go to an extremely popular channel, go to I Hate Everything, claim that he's put content in his video that is yours, and you will automatically begin receiving the revenue stream from that video, which could be, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that he's losing and that they're gaining. And meanwhile, the process for having the strike reviewed and removed could take you a week or two, by which time you've now lost a significant, or maybe the majority of the revenue that the video was going to generate.
No one do what he says, please. But yeah, now I think they've actually stopped it to where they can't get revenue anymore. They just, when they put the strike, or at least the one I got, I can no longer do anything on my channel, nor can anyone view that video. So I'm not sure if they're changing it now or what's going on with that.
I think it depends on whether it's automated or manual strike. That's what I've read. I could be wrong about this, but it sounds to me like if you put content in your video that is automatically detected, then you may get the kind of strike that you're talking about, where the video is just automatically taken down. But apparently, if you do this is what these companies have set themselves up to do, is these manual copyright strikes, and then when they do that, they can actually leave the video up but claim the proceeds from the video.
That is just wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Well, hopefully YouTube gets it fixed, because I've seen way too many channels getting taken down as of lately, and, well, I'm one that's probably going to be taken down in a few days.
Yeah, it's not a good situation, but like I said, I would expect that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. So, YouTube being owned by Google, Google have come out and said that they believe that large technology corporations should be above the law, and that they should have the right and be protected in their pursuit of improving society. And so they're kind of like, the old school James Bond villain who says that when he has ultimate power, he's going to restructure and reshape society, and it doesn't matter how many people die in the process or how many rights are violated in the process. That's exactly the way in which Google operates. And when they talk about don't be evil, the problem is that they are, in a sense, these sort of a megalomaniac corporation that believes that it understands and has the power to change the world for the better. But in their view, dissent or dissenting comments online, that's bad. And so you've got to have that right taken away from you. This is a lot of, like I said, China is a really good example of what's happening, because in China, the Chinese population have made a joke out of the word being harmonized or harmonious, anything, because the Chinese government constantly uses harmony as the excuse why they cover up certain information, or why they will kidnap someone and take them off to be programmed. And Chinese people have now turned the word, if you harmonized, that doesn't mean that. It means you've been taken off somewhere and brainwashed. But to the Chinese government's view, it's all about creating a harmonious society, and that's a good goal. So, if anything we do towards creating a harmonious society, well, that also must be good, right? It doesn't matter how bad it is, as long as the end goal is good. That's the same way that Google thinks.
Well, why do you think there's no competition for YouTube that's really out there?
So people listening to what I'm going to say next are probably going to think that I'm a crazy conspiracy nut, but I believe it's because companies like YouTube, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Facebook, they are all of them supported by and protected by the government, because the government sees them as incredibly useful tools through which they can assert their policies and affect change in the world. Microsoft is a great example of this. A lot of people, have talked about the history Microsoft had with the U.S. government, and the fact that when the U.S. government saw that DOS and Windows were going to become the dominant platform for computing around the world, of course, they went to Microsoft and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if you gave us some backdoor power into that OS so we can spy on all the machines and everything that's going on inside of them? Very much like what's happening with Apple and the FBI right now. So when people talk about the history of Microsoft and at the moments where they needed investment or protection or support, the government was always there for them. So imagine having that kind of power. We're supposed to live in a capitalist society where the merits of your product and your team and your services decide your success or failure. But everybody knew that Microsoft did not produce the best product, but somehow over the years they dominated the market. Well, how did that happen? How has it happened that Twitter survives to this day, even though their stock is tanking and their investors and executives are fleeing?
Well, have you heard of the I don't know if it ever came out, but there was a app that was coming out called Peoples, where people can actually rate you, put up all your personal information, and you'd really have no knowledge of it.
Yeah, that was pretty scary.
Do you think?
I saw that.
Do you? I haven't heard if it actually got canceled or not, but
I don't know. There was such massive backlash against it, and I think rightly. But I don't know what's happened with it since.
I know they openly admitted they were working with the government, and I know hasn't Facebook openly admitted they've also worked with the government?
Of course, they have, and Google has as well. And the places where they admit that they've worked with the government are pretty frightening. I mean, that was one of the big studies that Facebook released their data from, was one on shaping the emotions of an audience by manipulating the feed data that they saw on any given day. And so they did this massive psychological experiment on hundreds of thousands of people without consent in order to judge whether or not they could make people happy or sad based on the content that was shown to them in their newsfeed. They then, for some weird reason, released the results of this study, and they said that, yes, in fact, we can manipulate people's feelings based on what we show them in the newsfeed. And then when people dug into the details of the researchers, they found that these same researchers had done that exact same experiment for the Department of Defense or one of these other, major U.S. government military arms. And so, of course, that caused a lot of people to freak out because it's like, why is Facebook bringing on researchers that have previously worked with the government, on manipulation of populations, and given them free access without warning to their users, and allowed them to run these same experiments in the wild. And who's to say they're not still doing it? I think that they are.
Oh no, I've seen my feed. I'm agreeing with you. I think they are. So how long do you think until the corporations just come out and own the entire world? I mean, openly own the entire world.
Well, I think that they already do. I mean, it's, we're already there. I think that what we're seeing now is, like I said, it's a sort of expansion of their rights and a destruction of our rights, sort of reaching into every corner of, the world that we live in, both online and in the real world. I mean, that ownership of the world by the corporations is finished. Now it's just a struggle over our ability to say anything about it.
Do you think people are gonna start standing up more and being heard, or just quietly go along with anything that happens?
Well, but that's the thing. You can't stand up and be heard anymore. The internet is one of the last places where you can. Look at, the U.S. They now have these free speech zones. So, you can't just go anywhere and express your ideas. You have to go to find a free speech zone. There's instances of people being arrested for trying to carry a copy of the Constitution onto, public land, the courthouse, or to a courthouse. They're trying to give away copies of the Constitution, and they're arrested for it. And I think it's already gone. Look at the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act has in it protections for specific industries that make you liable and is a federal offense if you say anything negatively against agriculture, beef industry. So, you have a situation in the U.S. where your right to free speech is 100% limited by protections on corporations, which mean that you cannot say anything negative about those corporations. When is it going to be that Google, Twitter, Facebook also have those protections in place?
If Google gets those protections, we're all kind of screwed.
Well, I mean, Google, basically has those protections. I don't know if you've ever tried to get in touch with Google. I mean, you say you have a copyright strike, but how do you reach out to Google, right? Why is it that when these people who are generating content for YouTube have these significant issues, the only way they can get in touch with Google or YouTube to express their frustration and try to affect change is through a public campaign on Twitter? Right? That's the problem. There's no email address or phone number that you can call. Google is and YouTube as well. It's just a big, shiny monolith with no input output for people to register their complaints. So what are you going to do? It's already done.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And like small channels like me, I've been trying to get my word out there. I've been contacting bigger YouTubers for help and stuff, and it's basically been I'm completely ignored.
That's right. Well, and that's how you take power away from people. You shut them off. Right? You create the ubiquitous platform. It's a monopoly, and then when people have problems with it, you just don't offer them any recourse. Right? You're going to eventually get bored, give up, and go home, and you'll stop trying. You'll stop trying to communicate because the only platform that you had on which to express your opinion has blocked you, and you have no way to fight that. So here in China, they do something. I mean, this is kind of what shadow banning is about. China got really smart about it. Instead of just blocking people, they started doing service degradation. So your, like I said before, like maybe your internet would go offline for 15 minutes or something. So what happens is you just get so frustrated with it. Your internet gets so slow, or the connection's dropping so often, that you just give up. You're like, well, why even waste time on this? It's just, the effort that goes into trying to interface with this system is so great, that I just get bored and I want to stop. And this is exactly the way that Twitter operates. It's the way that Facebook operates. It's the way that Google operates, is to create a layer of frustration, a layer of bureaucracy that's so enormous that people just give up and stop trying.
Darn it, China, why? Why did you teach them?
Hey, I've got to run in a minute here, so I don't know if you guys have any like wrap up questions or.
We'll let one fan ask one more question, and that's Chaos Shifter asking, since you live in China, is there anything you miss from America, such as food or products?
Not really, because it's all here. The Shanghai, the city I live in, city of 25 million people, has more Apple flagship stores than any city in the world. It has more Gucci stores. Not that I need to buy a lot of Gucci, but lots of Gucci stores, lots of McDonald's. I mean, we've got Pizza Hut, we've got Coca-Cola, we've got. I mean, it's every single Western brand that you could want or not want. And so the same goes for, food. I mean, we get every kind of a food you can imagine. Some of the best food in the world, actually, now, because so many great chefs have moved here. I think that the biggest thing, like I said, is the two biggest frustrations for me here would be the internet, just that it's so slow and so often disrupted, and that you have to use a VPN to get to the outside world. And then the air pollution. So the air in China's pretty horribly polluted all the time, and that gets to be really old as well.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us, and hopefully you'll join us again when you have another game coming out. Sorry we kind of went way off track, but it was really fun.
Yeah, no worries.
And
thank you so much for having me on.
have a wonderful day, and again, thank you so much.
You too. Talk to you later.
Bye. All right, guys. Whoop. Fuck.